Hey YouTube, Greg here, and welcome back to episode 5 of my Learn Latin series. Last time we looked at first conjugation verbs in the future and imperfect tenses, and this time we're going to have our first look at some Latin nouns. So just before we begin, I'll go over the answers to last week's questions. So, vita batis means you are avoiding. Servabunt is they will protect. Amabimus, we shall love. Ambulabam, I was walking, and salutas, you singular greet. The English into Latin ones, they will overcome is superabunt, I was calling is vocabam, we used to walk, ambulabamus, to sail, navigare, and she will set free, liberabit. So hopefully you managed okay with those. If you had any problems or if there's anything you don't understand, then please leave a comment below and I'll try and get back to you. So before we can cover Latin nouns, we need to just make sure we understand the sort of basic grammar behind it. So for those of you who don't know what a noun is, it's a word used to identify a person, place, or thing. There are common nouns which describe non-specific things, such as a tree, a desert, a crocodile, or a man. And there are proper nouns which describe specific places or people, like Cicero or Rome or the Sahara, Jupiter or the Empire State Building, etc. There are also concrete nouns which describe tangible physical things like books and desks and doors. And there are abstract nouns which cover less tangible things like thoughts and dreams and ideas. So, in this sample sentence, the boy throws a ball with his left hand to Julia, the daughter of the king. We've already covered verbs, so we know that they're doing words, action words. So we know that the verb in this sentence is throws, from to throw. The nouns in this sentence are boy, ball, hand, Julia, daughter, and king. Now each of these nouns is playing a slightly different role in the sentence here. And in English, we know what role it is playing, usually by the order, the word order, where it appears in the sentence. So the subject comes before the verb, the object comes after the verb. So the boy is throwing, and the ball is what's being thrown. If I were to jumble up the order of these words and say, the daughter throws a king with his left Julia to ball the hand of the boy, obviously it becomes nonsense. But in Latin, there isn't that same trait. You can mix up the words in Latin and the sentence will still mean the same thing. And that's because the role that a noun plays in the sentence is not determined by its position within the sentence, but by its endings. So the different forms a noun can take are called cases, and there are 6 different cases in Latin. So let's go through these in turn. The first is the nominative, and this is the case of the subject. So if I take the sample sentence, the boy throws the ball, the boy is the one doing the verb, therefore he's the subject of the sentence, and he would be in the nominative case in Latin. The next is the vocative case, and that covers direct address when you're speaking to someone in a sentence. So in this sentence, which is how Mark Antony opens his speech in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, he says, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. And in this case, friends, Romans, and countrymen are all in the vocative case because they are being directly spoken to, directly addressed. The next is the accusative case, and that covers the direct object of a sentence. So if we take our first sentence as an example, the boy throws the ball, we know that the boy is the subject, he's the one doing the throwing. But the ball is what's being thrown. It's the direct recipient of the verb. Therefore, it's the direct object of the sentence and would appear in the accusative case in Latin. The fourth case is the genitive case, which is roughly equivalent to the English possessor case, and it indicates possession or ownership of something or someone. So in this sentence, I love the king's daughter. The daughter belongs to is not the right word, but the daughter is the king's. It's his daughter. In English, we show possession using apostrophe s. In Latin, we would show possession by putting the word king in the genitive case. And note that the other way of writing this sentence would be to say, I love the daughter of the king. In both cases, the king is the possessor, and the king would be in the genitive case. Next we have the dative case, which highlights an indirect object. So an object that's not directly receiving the verb, but is affected by the verb. And in English it's often preceded by the preposition to or for. So in the sentence, the boy threw the ball to Julia, Julia is being affected by the verb because the ball is being thrown to her, but she's not the direct recipient, she's not being thrown. Therefore she's the indirect object of the sentence, and in Latin Julia would be in the dative case. And finally, the most complicated of the cases is the ablative, which is a sort of modifier. It modifies the verb, and in English it's often preceded by the prepositions by, with, or from. So in this sentence, I bought the shirt with money. Money modifies the verb. It's telling us how the shirt was bought, and it's preceded by the preposition with. Therefore, it's in the ablative. Another example would be, she was loved by the people. The people are the agents in this sentence. They're modifying the verb to love, and they're preceded by the preposition by. Therefore, people would be in the ablative case. So remember that sentence I gave you at the start of the episode? I designed it specifically to contain 5 of the 6 cases I've just taught you to help illustrate them. So the boy throws a ball with his left hand to the daughter of the king. In this example, boy is the subject of the sentence because he's the one conducting the verb, he's the one throwing. The ball is the object of the sentence, therefore it's in the accusative case. With his left hand, that's showing you how he threw the ball, it's modifying the verb, and it's preceded by the preposition with, therefore hand would be in the ablative case. To the daughter is the indirect object in the sentence. She's not being thrown, but she's being thrown to, and she's preceded by the preposition to, therefore she is in the dative case. Of the king, again the king, it's his daughter, so the king would be the possessor in this case, and he would appear in the genitive case. So that's quite a lot of detailed grammar to go through in a short place of time, but hopefully when you see some examples things will start to fall into place. So we've discussed in previous lessons that in Latin verbs belong to distinct groups called conjugations, depending on their endings and how they behave grammatically. And we've had a look at verbs that belong to the first conjugation. Similarly, nouns belong to distinct groups which behave differently, and these are called declensions. And there are 5 declensions in Latin. Latin nouns also have a gender, which can be either masculine, feminine, or neuter. There's actually quite a common feature of many European languages, German and Italian and French, to name a few. But in English it's not really a feature at all. So it can be a little bit strange for English speakers to get their head around at first, but just know that it's a grammatical concept, not a natural one, and it is important when you're learning nouns to remember which gender they belong to. It will become especially important when we learn about adjectives, descriptor words in future, because these change depending on the gender of a noun. And finally, we can tell which declension a noun belongs to by looking at the ending of the genitive singular case. And all first declension nouns have a genitive singular which ends AE. So what does that mean? Well, if I take my Latin dictionary at home and we look at this word in the middle, porta, portae, meaning gate, whenever you look up any noun in a Latin dictionary, it will give you 2 forms. The first of these forms is the nominative singular, the singular subject, which in this case is porta, and the second form is the genitive singular, the possessor, and in this case it's portae. So it ends AE, and that's how we know that this is a first declension Latin noun. Incidentally, the little f following porta, portae means that the noun is feminine. So once we take off this AE, we're left with the base of the noun, which is port, and we can add different endings to this base for the noun to play different roles in a sentence. Just while we're here, there are two other first declension nouns on this page, so you might want to try pausing the video and trying to find them before moving on. So now let's learn what these endings are for nouns of the first declension. This is how I like to order the different cases: nominative, vocative, accusative, genitive, dative, ablative. It makes the most logical sense to me. But bear in mind that different textbooks and different teachers sometimes order these in a different way. So just keep that in mind if you're learning using these videos and some other source, just so as not to confuse yourself. So the endings for first declension Latin nouns are as follows: nominative singular a, nominative plural I, vocative singular a, vocative plural I, accusative singular am, accusative plural as, genitive singular I, genitive plural arum, dative singular I, dative plural is, ablative singular a, ablative plural is. This won't make a whole lot of sense until we actually put a noun in and see how this works. So if we take that noun that we've just learned, porta, portae, feminine, a gate, we know it belongs to the first declension because its genitive singular, the second form, ends ae. If we remove that, we're left with the base, which is port, and we can put that base in front of each of these endings to get different forms of the noun. So porta, a gate, as the subject, portae, gates, as the subject, porta, o gate, being addressed, portae, o gates, plural, address, portam, a gate, as the object of a sentence, portas, gates, as the object of a sentence, portae, of a gate, portarum, of gates, portae, to or for a gate, portis, to or for gates, porta, by, with, or from a gate, and portis, by, with, or from gates. Now, one thing that people commonly ask now is, hang on, a lot of these endings are the same. If I see portae, how do I know if it's gates as a subject, or o gates being addressed, or of a gate, or to or for a gate? If I see portis, how do I know if it's to or for gates, or by, with, or from gates? And the only answer I can give at this stage is the context of the sentence usually makes it apparent which one. There is some ambiguity to certain Latin sentences, but usually when you see the sentence as a whole, and you look at the endings of the verbs and the adjectives and the other words in the sentence, it's obvious which form is being used. Another important thing to point out here is that the nominative and vocative singular ending is a short a, porta, whereas the ablative singular ending is a long a, porta. So if you're wanting to pronounce this authentically, you have to make sure you distinguish between the two, porta and porta. So let's try this with another Latin noun. So let's take regina, reginae, a feminine noun meaning a queen. And we have a British 10-pence piece coin there with Elizabeth II, who's currently Queen of the UK. And if you've ever been curious, that little Latin inscription around the outside, Dei, gra, reg, fid, def, is a shorthand way of writing Dei gratia regina, fidei defensor, which means by the grace of God, Queen and defender of the faith. But anyway, we know that this is a first declension Latin noun because the second form, the genitive singular, ends ae. If we take that off, we're left with the base, regin, and we can add that in front of each of these endings to get the different forms. So regina, a queen, as the subject of a sentence, reginae, queens, as the subject, regina, o queen, reginae, o queens, reginam, a queen, as the object, reginas, queens, as the object, reginae, of a queen, reginarum, of queens, reginae, to or for a queen, reginis, to or for queens, regina, regina, by, with, or from a queen, and reginis, by, with, or from queens. Another important thing to note is that even Latin names will change their ending depending on their case and their role within a sentence. So if we take Vesta as an example, Vesta being the goddess of the hearth and home in ancient Rome, Interestingly, there was a cult that worshipped Vesta, which involved virgin women taking a vow of celibacy for 30 years. And during this time, they couldn't wash themselves or cut their hair or cut their nails, and they weren't allowed to sleep with anyone. And during that time, they had to constantly tend to a huge flame in the temple and make sure the flame never went out. And if they broke this vow, then they would be buried alive. So it was very serious business. And a very famous Vestal virgin was a woman called Rhea Silvia, who gave birth to the twins Romulus and Remus, who, according to the myth, later went on to found Rome. But that aside, we know that this name is also a first declension Latin noun, Vesta, Vestae, because the second form, the genitive singular, ends ae. Taking that off, we get the base, west, and we can add that to these endings to get the different forms. So Vesta, Vesta as the subject, Vesta, O Vesta, being addressed, Vestam, Vesta as the object, Vestae, of Vesta, Vestae, to or for Vesta, Vesta, by, with, or from Vesta. And note that there are no plural forms here because we're not talking about an object that can be pluralized. We're talking about one singular individual goddess. So just a quick point on genders in the first declension. Almost all nouns of the first declension are feminine, so that makes it a little bit easier to memorize them. The most notable exception to this are those of male professions, so any job that was traditionally done by a man in the ancient world will be masculine if it's a first declension noun. And the three most common examples of this are poet, which is poeta, poetae, masculine, farmer, agricola, agricolae, masculine, where we get words like agriculture from, and sailor, nauta, nautae, also masculine, giving us words like nautical. So remember that most first declension nouns you come across will be feminine. The only exceptions are male professions, and these are the three most common. And finally, just a brief note on word order. So the usual order of words in a Latin sentence is subject, object, verb. So the subject being in the nominative case and the object being in the accusative case. As in this example, poeta reginam amat, the poet loves the queen. But note that unlike English, you can swap these words around, change the order of them, and the sentence will still make sense. The only thing that changes is the emphasis. So if I say instead, reginam amat poeta, this still means the poet loves the queen, but now since reginam is first, the word queen is being emphasized. The poet loves the queen. And similarly, amat reginam poeta still means the poet loves the queen, but this time loves is being accentuated. The poet loves the queen. If you wanted to inverse this sentence to say the queen loves the poet, you can't just change the order around. What you have to do is change the endings to get regina poetam amat. So in poeta reginam amat, poeta is in the nominative case, reginam is in the accusative case, whereas in regina poetam amat, regina is now in the nominative case, and poetam is in the accusative case. So let's learn some new vocabulary. So we've already covered 5 new first declension Latin nouns this episode, those being porta, portae, gate, regina, reginae, queen, poeta, poetae, poet, agricola, agricolae, farmer, and nauta, nautae, sailor. We also have fortuna, fortunae, which means fortune or luck, puella, puellae, meaning girl, rosa, rosae, meaning rose, and careful here that the O is a short O, rosa, not rosa, insula, insulae, meaning island, and mensa, mensae, meaning table. And let's also learn some new first conjugation verbs. So we have neco, necare, necavi, necatum, meaning to kill, desidero, desiderare, desideravi, desideratum, meaning to long for or to desire, culpo, culpare, culpavi, culpatum, to blame, Do, dare, dedi, datum, meaning to give, to offer, or to present. Note that this is an irregular verb because its third and fourth principal parts, dedi and datum, don't follow the same pattern as most other first conjugation verbs. But I haven't really explained what those mean yet, so don't worry about it for just now. And finally, pugno, pugnare, pugnavi, pugnatum, meaning to fight. So here are some questions to practice for next time. First of all, some Latin into English translations. Puella agricolam vitat, vestam laudabo, poetae insulam amant, rosas puellae dabam, and mensas reginarum ornatis. And some English into Latin. The poet longs for the girl. I was fighting the sailor. The girl gave a rose to the queen. They adorned the table with roses, and she will praise the island's queen. So let's just finish up with some phrases and etymology. The Latin phrase for this lesson is amabote, which literally means I will love you, but was used as a way of saying please in ancient Rome. Similar to the English I beg you or I beseech you, the Romans would say I will love you if you do this, and that was their way of saying please. The etymology for today is the word quintessential, which means representing the most perfect or typical example of something, and it comes from these two Latin words, quinta, meaning fifth, and essentia, meaning form or essence. And in pre-atomic theory, people commonly believe that the world was composed of four elements, those being earth, air, fire, and water. And there was thought to be this fifth element that was somehow otherworldly or divine, and therefore superior to the others. And the word quintessential makes reference to this fifth essence. So that's all for this time. Next week we will look at some prepositions and conjunctions, as well as some more first declension nouns. If you've enjoyed this lesson and are enjoying the series in general, then please do like and subscribe, as this helps me out a lot, and it will help you to see when a new video is uploaded. And just before I go, I'd like to thank my patrons and supporters, Sarah Kay and Serchalon, and offer an especially large thank you to my new patron Mary B for her incredibly generous monthly donation. Thank you all so much, guys. You're awesome. If anyone else would like to help out or get involved with the channel, then please do check out my Patreon page by clicking on the orange P above. It helps me out greatly and means that I can devote more time and resources to getting these videos up on a more regular basis. And there are some special rewards for those who pledge, such as a private email address to send me questions and translation requests, and some more personalized Skype-based lessons. So if you're interested, then please do check out the link above. Amabote. That's all for now. See you next time, guys.